Okay, so we are going to be solving quadratic equations. Yeah, page 29. Didn't you guys didn't need to write any of that down. I said that at the beginning of the video. Okay, so solving quadratic equations. When we are solving, that means we actually want a solution or a value for our variable. Do we remember the zero product property? Where it was in factored form and we set each of the terms equal to 0 and solved? It was our very first lesson for this unit. So you don't have to flip back, but let me flip back real quick. Huh? So it was this lesson here, where we had it in factored form already, and we set each term equal to 0 and solve for x. We remember that? Okay, so we're going to take that today, along with factoring, to get an answer. So we're going to factor and then use the zero product property. Okay? Don't worry, we're going to go through it. So we are going to solve each equation by factoring. We're going to solve each equation by factoring. I'm going to give you the steps. An equation has an equal sign. So anytime you see an equal sign, you are finding a solution. And you do not get to just add an equal sign just to add it. Okay, so if it doesn't have it, you're not solving. You're not finding a solution. So the first thing that we need to look at is our equation in standard form? We know what standard form is, correct? What's standard form? Okay, so ax squared plus bx plus c, but highest exponent to constant, right? We've dealt with standard form. You need to make sure your equation's in standard form. With that, you will also make sure that your equation will equal 0. Okay, so you're going to have to move some things around like we did in Algebra 1, moving something from one side to the other. Our equation will equal 0. If our equation doesn't equal 0, you can't factor it. Okay, so writing it in standard form will make it equal to 0 if you do it properly. Our next step is going to be to factor, and we are pretty good at factoring. Your quiz showed me that most of you can factor. Where should we start with factoring? GCF. GCF always. Then we have differences squares. When do we know when to use differences squares? What are their qualifications? Two terms? Subtraction sign?
Perfect squares.
Perfect squares. Okay? So two terms, subtraction sign, perfect squares tells me I can use differences squares. If I can't use differences squares, I probably am going to use the x or the super x. What's important about using the x or the super x? Okay, so if your a value is 1, you'd use the x. If it's greater than 1, you'd use the super x. But remember, the super x always works. What else, though, is important about like the expression in general? It has 3 terms. If it doesn't have 3 terms, you're not going to use the x or the super x. And your highest exponent is a 2. So if you see something higher than a 2, you probably need to do GCF. Okay, so those are things that you need to think about. Once we factor, we are going to use the zero product property. Okay, so we're writing in standard form. Once it's written in standard form, your equation will be set equal to 0. We're going to factor and use the zero product property. Cool? Okay, so let's try one. So we're taking what we've learned over the last couple weeks and putting it all together in one thing.
Is this like the final lesson?
This is the final lesson. That's on the test, yes. Okay, so I'm giving you the equation 7x squared equals 4. It's not an x. 7r squared equals 4r. Okay? It's not in standard form because we have things on both sides, and it says here that I need it equal to 0. What would you move to get them either to the left or to the right. What do you think would be easier? The 4r. I will tell you that it is easier to keep your squared term positive. Okay, because then you don't have to deal with extra negatives. So I would always move everything to your squared term. How do I move 4r? Subtract it. Okay, good. So we're going to subtract 4r from both sides. So I'm left with 7r squared minus 4r equals 0, which is exactly what I want. Okay, by writing it in standard form, I have set my equation equal to 0. What's step 3? Factor. Okay, so let's factor this. How would I factor it? So GCF, I can pull out an r, right? I'm left with 7r minus 4 equals 0. Now you should look at what's inside the parentheses. Is there anything else I can do to 7r minus 4? No. Okay, so step 3 is done. We factored. Step 4 is to take each of those factors and set them equal to 0. Wait, why are you doing that sign? Okay. So I'm going to take r and set it equal to 0. And I'm going to take 7r minus 4 and set it equal to 0. Just like we did with the zero product property. This is how I gave it to you when we did that lesson. Now you're doing the extra step because you know how to factor. Okay, well r equals 0. I don't have to do anything there. It's already solved for. But what do I do here? How do I solve for r? Okay, so let's start by adding 4. So 7r equals 4. Then what?
Divide
By
7.
7. When you divide by 7, you get r equals 4 sevenths. Okay, we are just combining multiple lessons together, but it is everything we've already done. You've written in standard form, you factored, you've done zero product property. Are we okay with that? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes. Okay. So far, so good. So let's try another one together before I let you try a couple on your own. A squared equals negative 10 plus 7a. All right, step 1 is to write it in standard form. Now I told you on number 1 that it's best to keep your squared term positive. So what do we need to move? We need to add the 10 and subtract the 7. Okay, so we're going to add the 10 and we're going to subtract the 7. And we need to do that to both sides, right? So I have a squared. Now, we want it in standard form, so what should I write next? Minus 7a plus 10, and all of that equals 0. Cool? Okay. Step 3 is to factor. Is there a GCF? Nope. There's 3 terms, so I'm either using the x or the super x. X. Why? Because this term here, the leading coefficient is 1. Okay? So I'm just going to use the x. Will the super x work if I want to? Yeah. What goes on top? 10. On the bottom? Negative 7. Two numbers that multiply to 10 and add to negative 7. Yes. Negative 5 times negative 2 is 10. Negative 5 minus 2 is negative 7. Okay? In factored form, that's a minus 5, a minus 2, and all of that still equals 0. Step 4, is the zero product property. So a minus 5 equals 0. A minus 2 equals 0. What does a actually equal? 5 and 2. Huh? Yes, we did. We have done this before. We've done all of these steps before, but separately. Now we're doing them all at one time. So let's see how you do. So I would like you to try 2k squared minus 13k equals negative 6. Okay, so let's see how far you can get. 2k squared minus 13k equals negative 6. Okay, what do I need to move to get this set equal to 0?
6.
The 6. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So you should have 2k squared minus 13k plus 6 equals 0. Okay, now we're going to factor. There's no GCF. My A term is greater than 1. So that tells me I'm using the super X. 2 times 6 is 12. And then I have negative 13 on the bottom with 2k and 2k on top. Two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to negative 13. Negative 12 and negative 1. Negative 12 times negative 1 is positive 12. Negative 12 minus 1 is negative 13. Okay, let's reduce. 2 goes into itself once and into 12 6 times, and this one does not reduce. So I'm left with k minus 6 and 2k minus 1, and those still equal 0. Are we still good? Yeah? Okay. Last step. K minus 6 equals 0, and 2k minus 1 equals 0. What does k equal?
6.
K equals 6. And then for this one, I would add 1 and divide by 2. So you should have gotten 1/2. How'd we do?
Good.
Some of us did good. For those of you that did not get that answer, can you tell me where you're getting stuck at?
I didn't do the super X.
You didn't do the super X? Okay, so it's just remembering the factoring rules. Anyone else? Yeah.
Wait, why would 2k minus 1 equal half?
So you would add 1 to both sides, giving you 2k equals 1, and then divide by 2. K equals 1/2.
Is the 2 part from the 2k?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Last one I want you to try on your own.
Wouldn't it be negative?
Nope, because you added 1 to both sides.
Oh, okay.
3b squared equals 16b plus 12. 3b squared equals 16b plus 12. Okay, so the hardest part for this one is moving stuff. What should I move?
16B.
The 16b and the 12. So I'm going to subtract 16b and I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides, giving me 3b squared minus 16b minus 12 equals 0. Okay, if you don't have that step right, you are not going to be able to factor.
Even if they're like mixed up?
Well, technically your A, B, and C are wrong. It needs to be in standard form,
Oh, yeah.
right? Highest exponent to constant. Okay, do I have a GCF? No. So I'm going to go straight to the super X. 3 times negative 12 is negative 36. And I have a negative 16 on the bottom. And then 3b and 3b. So two numbers that multiply to negative 36 and add to negative 16.
That one's hard.
That one's hard. If you divide 36 by 2, you get 2 and 18. And 18 needs to be negative.
Wait, don't they both have to be?
Negative 18 times 2 is negative 36. Negative 18 plus 2 is negative 16. Now I can reduce. That becomes 1 and 6. This side does not reduce. So I'm left with, I'm going to write it over here, b minus 6 times 3b plus 2 equals 0. Set each factor equal to 0. What does b equal? 6 and negative 2/3. Subtract 2 and divide by 3. Negative 2/3. So some of us definitely have this down. Some of us were mixed up on things that we've been working a lot on. We have been factoring for like 3 weeks. Yes, it is almost a month. Good job. Okay? We should be really good at factoring at this point. We've done a lot of practice. So now we're just combining a few new pieces to it.
So B could be, for B, there could be two different terms for the same variable.
Mm-hmm.